Following the terrorist attacks of 9/11, Ron Paul stood as the lone patriotic voice of reason and wisdom in Congress. Because of his devotion to the Constitution and his loyalty to our troops, Ron Paul refused to give President Bush the authority to invade Iraq without a formal declaration of war by Congress, which is mandated by the Constitution. He refused to ask our young soldiers to spill their precious blood in another undeclared illegal war. Before the United States invaded Iraq in 2003, Ron Paul knew what President Bush, Vice President Cheney, and every senior elected official in Washington knew, or should have known, that Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction and was not a strategic threat to our country. How did they know? They knew because from the end of the first Gulf War in the early 1990s until the time that the United States invaded Iraq in 2003, our military and strategic intelligence agencies were using fixed-wing aircraft and satellites equipped with the most advanced surveillance technology in the world to constantly monitor all significant industrial and military activity on the ground inside Iraq. Saddam Hussein could not have possibly developed the industrial complex required to produce the alleged weapons of mass destruction without our knowledge. Ron Paul warned us that the war financiers, the military-industrial complex, and their political puppets in Washington would use the 9/11 attacks to drag our country into another unjust and unconstitutional war. We are now paying a heavy price for ignoring Ron Paul's wise counsel and honorable leadership at that critical moment in our history. More than 4,000 American soldiers have died. Tens of thousands of troops have been maimed for life. Hundreds of thousands of innocent Iraqi civilians have been killed. Hundreds of billions of dollars of destruction has been inflicted on Iraq, and the working people of America have been forced to pay more than $1 trillion for this carnage. And for what? What have we received in return for the sacrifice of our blood and treasure? Secret prisons, the unconstitutional Patriot Act, national ID cards, suspension of habeas corpus and our due process rights, surveillance cameras at every corner, warrantless searches and wiretaps, secret monitoring of our private communications, the torture of military prisoners, secret courts, 2-hour waiting lines and strip searches in our airports, widespread government fraud and political corruption, and hundreds of billions of dollars unaccounted for in defense and homeland security spending. Is this what we should ask our soldiers to die for? I don't think so. Benjamin Franklin said that those who are willing to give up their essential liberty for temporary safety will ultimately lose both. That is precisely what has happened in America. We have allowed our government to assume a level of power and control over our lives for which it has no constitutional authority. If America's founders were alive today, they would disown us as their countrymen. Our military troops have donated more money to Ron Paul than to any other candidate for president. But if you rely on the mainstream media for news about the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, you won't hear the truth about what our troops really think. They understand that their purpose is to defend America and its borders, not to overthrow foreign governments or to invade and occupy sovereign nations that represent no military threat to our country. They understand that America has no moral authority to police the world or to impose our values on foreign countries by force. But the primary reason Ron Paul has received such strong support from our troops is this: they know who will fight and die in these undeclared illegal wars, and it will not be the unaccountable politicians who start them. I served 5 years as an infantry officer in the United States Marine Corps and took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Unlike most of our political leaders, the patriotic men and women who are serving our country in uniform take that oath very seriously.